Hello and welcome to In the Mix, the Great British Bake Off podcast. We're back for our third week and it's all about bread. Hey JP, you're here to talk bread with me as well.
I am indeed, and it's bread week. I love this week. It seems early this year though.
I think it is like a week earlier or something than usual. But yeah, it is such a good week because the tent just becomes terrified because of 𝗵𝗂𝗧𝗵𝗲. But what I thought this bread week that stood out from the rest is that it kind of seemed orchestrated in favour of one of the contestants only. I don't know if they did that on purpose, but we had a very Italian week.
We did. That's one of the first things I wrote down. We've got 2 Italian bread tasks in 1 week. And last week, when we saw the preview, there was the sort of cheese and olive combination going on for the technical, and we didn't really know what it was. So when they announced that it was ciabatta, I was like, seriously, someone behind the scenes has seen Jürgen get 𝗏𝗏 twice, and now we're just trying to give anybody else a go.
I know, I was really surprised when it actually came up as ciabatta. I was like, really? Another one and another Italian bread? Okay, we've had olives to start with and olives in the middle, and I hate olives, so I wasn't sat there mouth-watering, as usual.
I know, just saw the olives and was like, nah, none of this, please.
None of this. So the first bake that they had to do in the signature challenge this week was to make a focaccia, which is how I say it. Everyone else seemed to say Focaccia or something. It was very like Focaccia.
No.
Maybe that's how you're meant to say it. But the way that Noel and Matt were saying it was doing my head in a little bit. But it was Focaccia. Yeah, there you go.
Surely.
Focaccia. I know. And then Noel really didn't sound like he knew what he was talking about with the focaccia. Oh, that's the same thing. Good. But he said it needs to have an open, irregular crumb structure and a crispy crust. I understand what a crispy crust is, but an open, irregular crumb structure... Did they just need to fill time?
I feel what we needed at that moment was Jürgen to come and explain that scientifically to all of us.
Yes.
So we knew what it was. So I have made focaccia before, ironically, actually, with radio work. So yeah, so a few years ago I went to go and interview some people at 𝗵𝗲𝗂𝗏𝗏 Bakehouse, and we made a focaccia bread. And it was, well, I say we made, she basically bought it, and I put some half of cherry tomatoes on top to decorate it. That was about all I did.
Nice.
But yeah, it's the TV magic. But yeah, no, focaccia, it's quite easy to make, which is why I thought it was quite an interesting task for Bake Off. But I suppose it's difficult to make well. And when you cut into a focaccia, it's sort of got that uneven. You've got some bigger bubbles and some smaller ones. It's not like your loaf of 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 that's going to be sort of like the same texture all the way through. So I thought that's where they were coming from in that one. But yeah, I wasn't 100% sure. Yeah. But I love focaccia, and I thought, do you know what, this is going to be a good challenge.
Oh, it's excellent. Focaccia is really, really good. And I imagine just like the serene malt loaf and the jammy dodgers from last week, or sandwich jammy biscuits, focaccia is going to be going off the shelves in supermarkets and bakeries and everything around the country probably today.
They've gone.
Yeah, I know. I might have to go and buy some focaccia just on my daily scout out to see whether the petrol station is A, full or queuing. And it's never full.
The shopping list is now fuel and focaccia. That's the list.
Yeah, 2021 for you there. So yeah, the open irregular crumb structure, interesting. You're definitely right. That's what they meant. But I feel like they could have made it a bit more accessible. Something about, have uneven holes in there. That's just easier.
There's a better way to describe it, or to show us as well. I suppose when we had the technical, they have one out and they sort of, cross-section and show us. But they didn't for the signature, which I thought was a bit weird.
That is a bit weird. And I felt like Noel and Matt really didn't get it either, but they just said it anyway. We'll talk a little bit more about Noel and Matt a bit later on, because they were getting quite a bashing on Twitter this week for just not being as amusing as they possibly could be. And there were calls for 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 again. But let's get into the focaccias. Now... you said you've baked one before, you've put cherry tomatoes in it. I think tomatoes are quite a standard ingredient. Olives as well, even though I don't like them. Rosemary or basil. And we had quite a few. And one of the things that I thought was quite weird is everyone seemed to just be cramming so many different types of flavours and things into their focaccia. It just seemed like some people went a bit overboard. I think Amanda, for example, she wanted to create a 𝗵𝗲𝗍 style focaccia. She went with feta, garlic, red pepper, olives, everything in there, stuffing it all in. And Rashika as well, she did garlic, cherry tomatoes, feta, honey, spring onions, red onions and black pepper. That's loads. there's probably a limit, don't you think, to how much stuff should be going in there?
Yeah, I completely agree. And the thing is with Bake Off is that you get this year on year with things like the signature bake. Yeah, you want to make something that's great, but leave that sort of stuff to the showstopper. For the signature, make something that tastes good, make something that's baked well. And we saw that with some of them, you know. To be fair, Maggie went with quite a classic one and she stuck with only a few flavours, but she didn't push anything in. So as soon as Paul picked up the focaccia, it just all fell off. It was like, oh, great, lovely. Whereas some of the other ones, I mean, Jürgen and there was somebody else who, it just didn't really taste great. They went with different flavours. I mean, Jürgen went with kippers and peppers, I think it was. And it was just like, why would you do that? And I thought also with Amanda, what Paul said was interesting about the fact she went for the meze one, lots of different flavours. And I love the fact she went with the stripes. I think that looks really, really good. A bit like Rashika and the sort of flower scene. But Paul was right in the fact that with a focaccia, if you are going to have 5 flavours in it, you want 5 flavours in every single bite. Not, have a little bit of the pepper slice or, you know, a little bit of onion or whatever. You want a little bit of everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of style over substance in this one, I thought.
There was a bit, and that's where I thought Rashika sort of went wrong a bit in the signature challenge this week. I thought her style, her design on her focaccia looked beautiful. It didn't, as you say, stick to that sort of traditional looking focaccia. And that kind of let her down. But I thought it looked beautiful, better than some of the others.
Yeah.
I think before we talk about the Italian god that is Giuseppe this week, and we're going to have to talk about our star baker from the first 2 weeks and your personal favourite, Jürgen. Now, I did say last week that Jürgen, he was doing so well. We were saying he might be on for a win already. But I did say maybe he's only good at biscuits and cakes, the sweet stuff. And he seemed to be okay at baking bread, but some of his ideas and flavours were really wacky this week. As you say, he introduced his focaccia, trying to do things a bit different, and said he was making a 𝗵𝗂𝗂. Yes, fish with peppers and boiled eggs. I'm sorry, but would you even try that?
I mean, put an olive in it, and that's literally my idea of a worst nightmare, that combination.
It's like a bush tucker trial.
Wrong show, Jürgen.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's great about the format is the fact that you're right, we have sort of biscuits, cakes, we have bread near the beginning, because nobody is going to be outstanding at all of those. And it sort of made Jürgen human again. We looked, I think it was on last week's episode, at someone who had managed to get 2 in a row previously the first 2 weeks. It's very rare to happen. No one's got 3. And I suppose that's because actually at the beginning, you are going to do those different areas of baking. And yeah, I think when you look at them, and we've sort of spoken about the sort of competitiveness between Jürgen and Giuseppe, with Jürgen, as we go through the series, if we get pie week or pastry week, you know, is he going to find that difficult? If he gets to the final and they do an afternoon tea and he's got to make bread for sandwiches, is he going to mess that up? All of a sudden, it sort of opened the competition out again. And they didn't need to do 2 Italian styles of bread for Giuseppe to get that to happen. But yeah, I thought it was good that actually not that he was knocked down a peg or 2 or anything like that, because, you know, he's the most unassuming person in that tent this year, bless him. But it was good for him to sort of be back in the sort of middle, so we don't have a foregone conclusion. Exactly.
I saw in a few of the little interview bits, you know, when they do outside the tent, you know, how did it go? He looked kind of off his game. He looked a bit like, he did seem a bit proud that he had Star Baker for 2 weeks, because you could see his confidence kind of go down this week when he was interviewed. He was a bit like, oh yeah, it wasn't a very great week for me, but maybe I won't win. But what I thought was interesting and slightly confusing is that Jürgen seems to think that British cuisine, as he puts it, is kippers. And that was the one thing when he started eating British food that he found that he loved and wanted to hold on to and pay homage to in the tent. And I'm sorry, but I can't get on board with our national food or cuisine being thought of as kippers and boiled eggs. Oh God, no.
Absolutely horrible. I'm like, where Isn't it 𝗁𝗃𝗃 or something that's Kippers? And like, why? That's not... No. Might have been British in the 1870s or something ridiculous, but yeah, possibly. That can disappear off the face of the earth, in my opinion.
Exactly. When I was about 14, I used to work in a cafe on the seafront, and they would do breakfast, and there was all different types of breakfast. You'd have like fry up and everything, but it was really like...
It was 𝗁𝗃𝗃.
No, not 𝗁𝗃𝗃.
Oh, good. I was
not 𝗁𝗃𝗃.
Oh,
breakfast, no. There was all the standard stuff, scrambled egg on toast things, sort of the classic things for the elderly people in the small sleepy town that I lived in. And one of the things they would have on the menu is Kippers. And I remember being a waiter with the other waiters as well. And anytime anyone ordered Kippers, it was like, right, open the windows, open the door. Why have they ordered it? Try and put them off. And it just looked horrific. I've never woken up in the morning and thought, you know what I'd like right now? Some fish. Fish on toast. Lovely.
Why? Yeah, you're right. Actually, I never thought of that. I don't wake up at 7 o'clock. Even when I was in Japan a couple of months ago and you eat sort of anything for breakfast over there, I wouldn't have thought myself sushi for breakfast. And I didn't see anybody else eating sushi for breakfast either. So yeah, fish for breakfast wherever you are in the world, wrong.
Exactly. I've got a bit of a bad habit that when I wake up in the morning, all I want to eat is sweet stuff. So I can't, I'm not happy if I'm going to have eggs on toast. I need to have Cocoa Pops or...
It's not going to cut it.
Bit of cake. No. Which is fine when Bake
Cake
Off's
for
on.
Breakfast. Easy. Yeah.
Fine. Christmas all year round is excellent. Oh, God. Someone who was having their own version of Christmas in the tent this week, we're going to have to talk about him. 𝗁𝗃𝗃. I don't know if he was just in luck because it was Focaccia and Ciabatta, but he did so well. And what was so lovely is when he was judged for his Focaccia, which was, let me have a look, a breakfast, which was inspired by having breakfast with his grandmother in Italy. And the olives and olive oil were actually from his family in Italy that he included. And he had cherry tomatoes as well. Paul gave him the first Hollywood handshake of the season.
We had the handshake. I know, I sat there and I called it before the episode. I was like, if there is not a handshake, particularly for Giuseppe this week, there is an issue. And we always have a handshake on Bread Week because Paul, likes to start dishing them out. But yeah, it was nice that he was the only one to get one this week. And I love the story of that, actually, with the olives and the olive oil from his family. And it was just a really nice nod.
It was lovely, and you could see how much it meant to Giuseppe as well, because he got quite emotional. He had a few tears after the handshake, and Paul even asked, can I have this recipe? Which is a massive compliment.
I know. Paul is all for the focaccia. He wants it now. But yeah, no, so it was a lovely moment, and so it was emotional to see that, and I thought it was it's lovely. Giuseppe, we spoke about him in the first episode and last week as well, and he seems like a really, really nice guy. I love that he's cooking with his kids. He's been putting stuff on social media about, there was a picture of his 3 kids watching the episode of Bake Off, and he was like, little do they know I'm going to be star baker, sort of thing. And it was really sweet how he sort of includes his family in it and everything. Exactly.
I feel like I definitely have a soft spot for Giuseppe, because when we spoke in our first episode, I was like, I think he might be the winner. I don't know why, but he's the person that I've picked. I feel like you are more Jürgen, so it's a battle between me and you as well as Jürgen and Giuseppe. So we'll see how that goes.
I love the competition.
I know, it's so good. One of the other people that I love, and you can tell that I love her because I talk about her every week now, is Lizzie. I have to talk about her again because she created a black truffle focaccia, which was amazing. And when asked why on earth she'd pick black truffle, is it because she loves it? She said, yeah, she likes it and she has it at Aintree, but she chose it because she didn't have to pay, which was brilliant. Brilliant.
I've got to admit, the first episode when I was watching, Lizzie was one of those that sort of fell under the radar a little bit for me. And then last week for Biscuit Week, we had her Harry Potter in the practice tent admission. And this week, I just came in with this whole new view of her. And yeah, she was very funny with that. It was great. It's like, well, I'm not paying for it. So yeah, you're only going to do Bake Off once. You got to make the most of it.
Exactly. Blow the budget. Do it. Get your black truffle if that's what you want.
Sod it. Do it.
Do it. So I thought the signature challenge with the focaccia was really good this week. And you're right, I was surprised that there was another Italian bread with the olive and cheese ciabatta breadsticks for the technical challenge. And what was weird about this is we've had weeks where they've had to create their own butter as well to go along with their bakes. But they got them to make a dip with their breadsticks.
Yeah. 𝗪𝗏𝗃𝗃, which is hard enough to say in itself, and that was great as well. It was another moment where Noel and Matt, I'm not quite sure, actually knew how to pronounce it or say things or remember that as they were going through. But it was a weird technical, and there was almost that thing as well at the beginning of like, right, breadsticks. Now, if you're not watching the episode and you're just listening to it, is it the sort of dry breadsticks that you get in a cardboard box?
I know.
From your local supermarket? Like, what do you mean by breadstick? It wasn't really a traditional British breadstick. It was more like an Italian or an American breadstick, which, yeah, probably confused people a little bit.
Exactly. I would never, I can't think of any reason that I would buy those in the box British breadsticks or whatever. I've never thought, oh, I've got a nice dip, what shall I put in it? Ooh. Oh, I'll go buy those breadsticks. I'd rather put my finger in the dip than one of those breadsticks.
To be fair, them. Yeah, I can see that one. Maybe if we need to keep panic buying, maybe if all the bread's gone, maybe if there is a massive surplus of tzatiki, we can buy breadsticks. It's fine. But yeah, exactly. Until then, not a big fan.
I know. Tzatziki is one of those things that I definitely think every member in my family says it differently. You know, you've got tzatziki, tzatziki, or just tzatziki without the T. I don't know. Listeners, you can tell us, listeners, in the comments, because everyone on Bake Off was saying it completely differently anyway. But again, with that, what on earth was the point? They dipped the breadsticks, but did we hear in the judging anything about the tzatziki? No, we heard nothing.
No.
What's the point?
Exactly. At one point he was like, "Oh, that's a nice dip," and it's. But the weird thing with that is tzatziki is Greek, I think. So we've got Italian bread with the ciabatta. We've got the cheese and olives, which is sort of a Greek flavour combination, and then a Greek dip to go with it. I was like, is this trying to slightly hide the fact that Giuseppe has got a one-up on everybody else for the second challenge in a row? Or obviously with a couple of Greek Cypriots in the tent this year, was that a bit of a nod to them maybe? I don't know. Exactly.
It seemed to work out like that, didn't it? You know?
Yeah.
Kind of tailoring the bakes. And we've said this the last 2 weeks, how much is the bake-off and the challenges and things that they're doing based on the characters and the people that we've got in the tent. And I mean, it really seems to be like that this week or this season. Maybe because we're talking about it in detail, we're a bit cynical and it looks like it. But come on,
maybe.
There were two quite similar challenges. Someone who did talk a lot about sort of the Greek Cypriot side of things and saying, don't worry about Giuseppe, we have these in Cyprus and stuff too, is George. And George was quite funny in this episode. He didn't have an excellent time with the focaccia. He had to make his dough twice. I'm just trying to remember him in the technical, whether I think he was one at the beginning when they sort of lifted it up and said, oh, this breadstick looks a bit like a snake because it was kind of moving around and not very cooked. That seemed to be the issue really with the technical, the breadstick. Some people did all right, but it was quite dense, and others this week, they were severely underbaked, and we had Christelle and Rashika and Prue. I don't know if you noticed this, but Paul, as we say, Lord of the Loaf, as they called him, King of Bread, as we've called him, he goes around the tent, is like the man this week.
Oh, yeah.
But Prue, she seemed to be a bit like nuts. I'm going to be honest, she seemed to be a bit sort of, had she had a tipple in the green room? Because some of the stuff she was doing was so funny. And she made a joke about how the breadsticks looked as if the oven hadn't even been turned on, which I thought was quite... a different thing for Prue to say. It was quite harsh, but they had a bit of a giggle. Did you notice that at all?
I did. She was a bit on one this week. I wondered if her and Maggie had switched places or something. It didn't feel right. You had Rashika with her very raw breadsticks, and she made the joke about the fact maybe the oven wasn't on. And then you had Christelle, who... It's a shame because actually I really like her signature bake, the feta and grape thing, and they loved that. It was very skinny focaccia, but... the technical was really raw as well. But she kissed the breadstick. She was like, oh, it tastes lovely. I'm just kissing it better. What are you doing? Look, I was slightly worried for her sanity at that point. Maybe she was just lost because Paul is king of bread and she doesn't really have a place on the bread.
Exactly. Matt Lucas, I think, said to Christelle in the signature, when Christelle was saying, oh, Paul needs this or Paul wants that, Matt did say, does Prue's opinion count for nothing? Yeah. So maybe she just felt like she didn't have a lot to do this week. But I looked at her when she was doing that weird, she picked up the breadstick and sort of had it here, took it away and got it all over her nose. And then when she was saying to Paul, Paul was like, what on earth are you doing? She kind of was like staring right into his soul, like right up close. And I was thinking, I'm pretty sure I've talked to people like that, in a disastrous club at some point. It's definitely not now, when I was like 20 and trying to be cool at university and going to the one club and drinking a 𝗂𝗶𝗅. That it looked very much like Prue had enjoyed some of the brandy snaps or something from last week, because smelling bread. Another funny moment from the technical challenge is the innuendo that's not even innuendo anymore. It's just pure filth, where Noel and Matt were asking Paul whether he'd ever decided to kiss a 𝗵𝗲𝗍 or a muffin. I mean, why did they pick these? Why didn't they just say, have you ever kissed a loaf? Or have you ever kissed I guess they couldn't say baguette because that's equally as bad.
I suppose. Yeah. It's full of it, particularly in Bread Week. I thought that there was going to be a lot more around the moment where they push their fingers into the focaccia. Yeah. I remember watching that and thinking, oh, here we go, waiting for it. And it didn't quite happen as much as I thought it would do. Maybe Channel 4, a little bit too near the knuckle for them. But it was nice to see the innuendos back a little bit. As you said earlier on, there wasn't a huge amount of humour in today, or in this episode. It was quite tame by the standards, really, of Bake Off nowadays, which was strange. And I don't know if it's because it's this whole format in the bubble this year, and they all seem a lot closer. When they were announcing the results, Matt and Noel said, we've got to know you guys. We're seeing you guys in the bubble and in the hotel, and we're hanging out and everything. So I don't know. I would have thought that would have brought more humour, but it just seemed a little bit flat this week. And the innuendos really were the only things where you're like, there it is. There's Bake Off. It's back. It's back.
Exactly. I do agree that some of the humour fell flat. There was a few tweets coming out on Twitter about Noel and Matt together. They did some really weird joke, I think, in between the technical and the Showstopper about... is this just a dream? Oh no, it's a nightmare type thing. But it went on for very long, and it was kind of like crickets, no one really laughing. And there are a few things about a muffin self-isolating, and it was a bit flat. And we had obviously had Noel as Where's Wally? Not unintentionally, just in a jumper, but then he turned into Where's Wally, which was good. That was some humour.
I liked it.
But maybe Bread Week just has that strange air about it because of Paul Hollywood and the fact that he's king of bread. People did actually look sort of terrified when he came to stand over them and question them about what they were doing. So maybe that's it. But the technical ended with Rashika, sadly in last place with her raw, flat, hasn't even gone in the oven breadsticks. And Giuseppe came out top as well. And Jürgen did clap him. He was sat next to him, I think. And I was watching Jürgen just to see if there's any him, he's winning, he's taking over my reign.
Damn it. No, I thought it was lovely. And actually, I noticed those two sit together all the time in the results as well, and in the technical, because I saw that. Because we've always spoken about the sort of undercover rivalry, which there really isn't at all. No, but we just hope there will be. In the sixth week, one of them's going to hit the other one over the back of the head with the rolling pin. It's going to be Murder Island, the show afterwards. It really is. But they seem to be really good, actually. Really good connection with each other, really good friendship. I also thought Lizzie did well in that one. It was great to see her second, so she's sort of been middle of the road, and I know she's a favourite of yours, and slowly becoming mine too. And Amanda too, who had 2 rubbish weeks, but she came third in the technical. It was just a little bit undercooked, and I thought actually it proved what we always know. It's a bit like when I was a teacher, you have children that are great at maths, and then you start teaching time, and the children that are great at maths usually absolutely crash and burn, and the children who are not as confident with maths, usually, be diplomatic, they usually find time really, really easy because it's more of a life skill sort of thing. And it's a bit like that with bread this week. Those that have been struggling completely, it was like, wow, you've done really well this week. And then the other way around.
Yeah, that is interesting how it brings out a whole new level of skill to some of the people. And actually, it shows, as you said, that it's just not going to be Jürgen all the way to the final. Let's move on to the Showstopper Challenge, because this week they gave them free reign again to create a 3D bread sculpture. And we've spoken about bread sculptures numerous times before because we always hark back to the days of, I think it was another Paul making his lion King of the Jungle lion bread, which sticks in people's
amazing.
memories. They can create some really good stuff. And so this time they wanted to create a 3D themed milk bread display. I hadn't heard of milk bread, but I've definitely seen it online. It's that sort of really soft, silky Japanese type bread that looks really visually pleasing, like you don't want to eat it.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think you can get something in the shop called milk roll, which I assume is a type of milk bread as well. I'm not sure. But it was interesting because after last week where we had the biscuit sculptures made out of gingerbread, apart from Amanda, this week they're making sort of nice sort of bread displays and everything, but they're making it out of milk bread, which is quite soft. I mean, we had one of them who made a koala that sort of crumpled in on itself and looked like it was sort of deflated. But I quite like this task. There were some really good sort of visual ideas. And again, it seems like one of those where it was difficult. It seemed difficult to mess up. I think milk bread's quite a basic type of bread from what I sort of gathered from the task, and I thought actually it was kind of nice in a way because we got to see everyone do quite well and it looked spectacular because it was all about the flavour and the look instead of the technical side of it.
Exactly. I think the thing that they had to watch out for is, I think Christelle said it in the show, that they needed to sort of exaggerate the features of their 3D scene before it was baked, because the baking sort of would make it expand. And we saw that with a few of the bakers. They still looked good and resembled what they were going to be, but I think they really had to make things a bit bigger. So let's go through some of them. So we had Rashika first, and I think this might be where she went a bit wrong, because she didn't necessarily over exaggerate the features or have something so quite easy, just a round thing like Freya did a turtle. That was quite easy really if you're doing some bread, but Rashika chose to do a really intricate bird cage design because her grandmother loves birds. I mean, the idea was great. It was a cinnamon and nutmeg milk bread, and the bird was cinnamon as well, and it had eggs, but that cage really took a lot of her time up trying to actually stick it all together and make sure it worked. Maybe she should have learnt from Amanda last week that trying to do something so intricately in that time pressure is just not a good idea.
And it just looked completely different from everybody else. Everyone else was going with those big loaves that looked soft and they were glazed and they were beautiful. Whereas Rashika's almost looked like the breadsticks from the technical, but also it looked really overbaked and dry. And I don't know, it was such a shame because it felt like, again, that somebody had missed the brief. And we've sort of had that every week. Tom missed the brief with the anti-gravity cakes. Yep. Maggie somehow scraped through after totally missing the brief last week with the interactive toy. And so this week it almost felt that Rashika missed the brief again, and it wasn't a big loaf and a nice display. She sort of made a breadstick bird cage and a couple of it didn't look spectacular at all, bless her.
No, I definitely agree. I think it's missing the brief, but then also maybe going with your idea that you want to do rather than thinking about what you're using to build it. So that was the same with Amanda building the rocking horse out of sugar cookies. She didn't really think about the substance that she was making it in because it was crumbly and whatever. It was just her personal preference. Same with Maggie and her biscuit sculpture. She wanted to create a beach scene, but it wasn't a toy, but she went with it anyway. And so now Rashika, she'd come up with a really cool looking bird cage, but the thing about milk bread is, which we learnt in the episode, it is that big, round, soft, fluffy bread, that you could sculpt into anything, but that was too intricate. And I don't think, I'm trying to remember what the judges said it tasted like, but I don't imagine it was that nice, soft roll texture, warm, that you'd want. It was probably just dense and crunchy for the bird cage.
They said it was, there wasn't enough, there wasn't a loaf, and she had proving issues as well. So because I think she proved everything together, the bird cage bread had been overproved because of course it was really thin, and then the eggs were underproved because they hadn't had enough time. So I mean, it sort of showed that she didn't have a great understanding of bread either, I suppose, with the different proving times. But I've got to say, for her, the signature that she did at the beginning was beautiful, and it was such a shame because I was really starting to get to know Rashika, and people were putting on Twitter at the beginning of the episode, they were like, oh, finally we're finding out more about Rashika.
Yeah,
is that a spoiler for later?
I know, they'd actually given her some screen time this week. We said that about jesino last week, and we didn't see much of him, and then he was out, and now we've only finally been given a little glance of Rashika and what she can do, and now she's out. So yeah, it is a little bit unfair really. We'd like to see them a bit more of their personalities shine. But I guess when you start off with 12, you've got to go to the big personalities first, really. So let's have a look at some of the other ones. So Christelle, she did a fantastic one this week. I really like Christelle. I've enjoyed her bakes from the beginning, especially with that first Showstopper she did with the big bunches of flowers. And this time she did a roast dinner. It said it had maple glaze, chocolate and hazelnut frangipane, lime curd, and carrot cake inspired carrots. I mean, how awesome did that look?
Yeah, it was brilliant. And I think that was the first one that when they were going through and introducing everyone, I was like, that's genius.
Yeah.
That's so clever. And she's such a great personality in the tent as well. And, she didn't do well in the technical. She was in that sort of danger zone. She'd had a great signature, although it was an annoyingly thin, as Paul called it, Focaccia. So she was nice in the technical. So she really needed to put it out of the bag with the Showstopper. And it just looked brilliant. She also gave a crackerlan a go, which I just love the word crackerlan, which is that thing you sort of paste on top and then it all cracks up as it bakes. And I thought, from her, that was a brilliant Showstopper and definitely redeemed her.
Definitely. And I think someone who did quite a similar thing was Lizzie this week. She had honey glazed, she put condensed milk, mango tea flavoured. It was a hog roast. And I like the fact that she did a pig in the centre. The chicken is a round sort of loafy thing. The pig's round. As I said, Freya did the round turtle. So they're really making use of the milk bread, actually having like a loaf of bread, but to make it look like something. I thought Lizzie's pig looked good. It looked a bit overdone, in some areas. It kind of went to darker brown, you probably wouldn't want to eat those bits, but it looked good, it looked good. Quite a good idea.
Yeah, and it was funny with the story of Susie the pig behind the scenes as well, slipping on the ice. I don't know why, I just found that really, really funny when she was talking about the story.
It's hilarious. I know, we find out all this random stuff. What is it with people having these random pets? We've got Freya with Winnie the horse, Susie the pig from Lizzie, and Prudence the dog from Lizzie.
Prudence the dog, Humphrey the rabbit. How can we forget him from week 1?
I know.
This year's pets are great.
They're just mad. And then we had sort of a bit of a battle with the octopus. Maggie did her seaweed, octopus and royal icing. Interesting mix. And the thing that is Maggie's downfall is that she's playing it too safe. She's too traditional. She's sticking to her guns. And she said to Paul, I don't think you will have tried this, but I'm going to do a seaweed bread or whatever. And he was like, yeah, I've tried that. I just think Maggie, I don't know if she's quite traditional, and then she really tried to go out of her comfort zone and picked seaweed, and Paul was like, yeah, I've had that, that's just normal. I think it's probably just, I don't know if it's an age thing or the fact that Paul is very celebrity city dweller and Maggie's enjoying playing badminton in Devon, and it just hasn't, those sorts of flavours of stuff she just doesn't have on a regular basis. But I felt sorry for her because Paul was like, yeah, I've had that. So her attempt to move away slightly from her traditional standard baking didn't really work. And we also
it was tricky.
We also had
Although
Amanda.
It was funny.
Sorry.
We did. I was also going to say it's right with Maggie. It was funny because she came back with a beach prop as well. And I just had flashbacks of last week. I was like, what is it with you and the beach? Would you stop with the beach scene? Please. I was like, we left that last week. Just stop.
I know. So funny. And then Amanda, she had a bright red octopus that she did too, which looked quite good in the Battle of the Octopuses. And then let's have a look. Jürgen, we've got to talk about him briefly because his kippers and eggs in his focaccia, mad. What's even more mad is when you have to make a 3D scene out of bread, bearing in mind that you've got to eat it, and he decides to make a baby.
A baby, because everyone wants to eat a baby apparently, or just as Paul did when chopping into the loaf, just cut the leg off. I was like, brilliant, well done, great, weirdo. To be fair, really, really strange. I think for that one, he probably went with the brief over the sort of thought of it. It was like, I can make a baby out of bread easily, But I did like the fact that he went with different flavours with the sort of like bottles and stuff around. I was like, it was genius. But it was a very strange one. I don't know how I would have felt like having that presented in front of me and being like, right, you can eat this. Yeah,
I've got to cut into that now. Yeah, great. A bit weird. I just think he's an excellent baker, but in this week, really, I feel like maybe he panicked because it was bread and he knew that wasn't a strong point. So then came up with some really odd ideas. but it did pave the way for Giuseppe, who did his fruits and vegetables, orange and cinnamon honey and orange liqueur glaze in his bake for the Showstopper. And I mean, come on, Giuseppe is star baker this week, and we can see why.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And again, I love the idea of it. He kept it quite simple. He was like, okay, well, I'm going to sculpture it on fruits and vegetables. It was really well themed, great flavours. And what was great as well, as you say, was the flavours. He managed to get the orange come through, which 𝗵𝗂 said is a really hard thing to do with bread. So yeah, it was so well deserved this week. And we both sort of said at the end of the first week that it was very close between the two of them. I don't think it was as close in week 2, but I really, really wanted Giuseppe to get a star baker, so I'm really glad that he's got one now. He's got to be there towards the end, surely.
I think so. I think he's doing really well. I did, because we'd sort of both said, I'd quite like him to get to the final in that first week. I feel like we've been waiting for him, even though it's only been 3 weeks, to get a star baker. I've been there like, is it Giuseppe's time now? And finally it was, thankfully. Something I'm also quite pleased about is we've seen one of the contestants, George, slightly redeem himself a little bit with his koala bread display in the Showstopper this week. I was pleased because he was having a few sort of issues in the first 2 weeks and he seemed quite nervous to be there, so I'm pleased George is sort of coming out of his shell a little bit more. But I was sad, as you say. Rashika is the one that left this week, and I was sad because we'd only just started seeing her personality.
Yeah, I suppose we sort of get to the point after the first episode, and we spoke about this on our first episode this series, of the fact that you do get to know all the bakers so that you do feel a little bit sorry for that person who goes first. And we did for Tom, mainly because we wanted to know more about the model shop. But
absolutely,
for week 3, when it comes to Rashika, I think this is the point where you actually start to really feel for them. And I thought that even though we didn't know Rashika that well, and we hadn't come to find out a huge amount about her. We haven't got the VTs as much for this week, trying to introduce the sort of backstory to them. It was really quite sad to see her go, and I think she could have given a lot more. She wasn't spectacular in the 2 weeks before. She was quite middle of the road. But yeah, I was quite gutted for her when she went, and she cried as well. I'm always a sucker for that on a TV show. You could tell that it meant a lot to her, and it was like, oh, no.
I know. She was having the most fun, but then sadly, her birdcage Showstopper and the fact that she was last with did these even go in the oven, Ciabatta Breadsticks. I mean, I guess it was her time to go, but yeah, you're right. I was sad about it because we do want to find out more about them. They should just have a few weeks where they're just all baking and having fun, and then they start eliminating them a bit later on. Like 𝗷𝗄𝗃, so we actually get to know who they are and what they are all about.
Exactly. It would be nice to get that and get maybe the first 3 weeks of bread, cake and biscuits out of the way, and then we can start getting rid of them.
Yes, we should tweet in about that because I think that's a good idea. So next week we've got coming up dessert week. I think that's going to be a good one. It's always, you always get a bit of a mess in dessert week.
Yes, well, we go back to Baked Alaska Gate, don't we? The ice cream thing with Diana and Ian. Yeah. Back in the day with Bingate. Oh, yeah. What's going to happen this year?
I know. So I'm looking forward to that one. Thank you so much, JP, for joining me on In the Mix for Bread Week. It has been a good one. Lots to talk about. And I'm looking forward to Dessert Week coming up next week too.
Bring it on.